Hi everyone, this is Takatoshi Shibayama, the host of the Future Design Podcast. This podcast looks to empower listeners with perspectives on how we can challenge the social norm and evolve with better understanding of philosophy, spirituality, and ethics. Empowered individuals can have much stronger voice and influence in bringing about revolutionary changes in the world, whether you're building businesses or technologies. My guests and I speak about social constructs that are commonly accepted in the world today that's not working anymore, and how to rebuild them with ethical values to create a better future. In this episode, I speak with Joshua Smith, a pastor and an independent researcher on the topic of robotic futurism and the potential of dehumanization. Joshua has been in the forefront of war, being a veteran in the military, understanding the cost of losing human values. It guided him to become a pastor and published a book called Robotic Persons. We discuss about the potential of robots, like the ones we see from Boston Dynamics, replacing human beings in the front lines of war. What our human society will look like when AI takes over our jobs, and also sexbots, replacing human companionship to fulfill our deepest sexual desires. Will we ever be able to continue what it is to be human, or are we going down the path of selfishness and immortality? So without further ado, here is Joshua Smith.
Future Design Podcast.
Hi, this is the Future Design Podcast. Today I have Mr. Joshua Smith on our podcast today. Thank you so much for being on our show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So Joshua, you're a pastor, you're an independent researcher on the topics of humanity amongst technology, AI. A lot of technologies are coming out in this space. And even in our episodes, we talk a lot about how to create better human beings to be able to use these technologies and create a better world. And I think topic is so important right now because more than ever, we have so many powerful technologies in our hands, and one can destroy us and one can actually create a better human society for all sentient beings. So I would really love to dive into those topics. But before I go in, could you explain to us who is Mr. Joshua Smith?
Yeah, like you said, I work full-time for a church. I'm a pastor, and if you don't know what that is like, it's basically like you're a small business owner. You're a CEO in many ways. I'm the only staff member, so I work by myself. So janitor, the financials, all this stuff is kind of run through me, but I delegate that down to other people that volunteer and work with us. And so I like to see it as just a small business owner who's trying to help the community provide spiritual needs and services, promote flourishing, helping in different ways. We do a lot of different things, but that's basically what I do. I'm a dad. I've got 2 kids and 1 on the way in August. I'm a husband and I've been married for 12 years. And so just a normal guy, but I did my PhD on this topic and wrote a book about it, and so now it's kind of become my night job. And so by day I do stuff here, and then by night I try to do more stuff related to advocating for regulating AI and promoting human dignity and flourishing. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. Well, congratulations for your upcoming child. I have 2 of my own. Each time was super exciting. I'm sure it is for you as well. Well, and I'm sure that you had something in your life that led you down to become a pastor, and also a different incident or series of incidents that made you really think about, where's humanity going amongst all this technology? I mean, what were some of these kind of events or occurrences that made you drive you down to this path?
Yeah, so I grew up very atheistic, and I wasn't raised in a religious home or anything like that. My grandmother was, and she raised me, but we didn't really talk about it or read the Bible or anything together, and didn't go to church. But when she passed away, I was 15, and that made me very angry because I knew she was a believer, and even though I didn't believe in God, I was pretty upset that, God would take her away as, so young, really, as she had cancer. But anyway, that kind of led me down a dark path, and I began to really think about that, and I just kind of went on with my life, and I joined the military the next couple of years. I really started to think about life and death a lot more. So I'm in the U.S. I joined the Army, and this was at kind of the height of the Iraq War, and so I was thinking about death a lot, and I started going to some of the chapel services. Didn't really do much, but anyway, I came home, started dating my wife, soon-to-be wife, and she invited me to go back to church, and that was really kind of the launching board for my faith now, and where I've been on this journey. But as far as becoming a pastor, you have to fast forward good many years to when I was actually in Iraq, and basically I was getting out of the military. I didn't know what I wanted to do full time. I knew maybe the ministry was probably where I wanted to go. I definitely wanted to study theology and philosophy, but I didn't think about being a full-time pastor. And I got an opportunity when I came back. I was a full-time student, and somebody just approached me and asked me if I'd be interested to lead a college ministry and to do that, and sort of be like a chaplain to college students. We were in a college town, and I said yeah. And so that was really the first step towards where I am today. But yeah, it's been a weird journey. Nobody else in my family is in the ministry or kind of involved in church like I am, and so I don't think they really understand it. And but it's definitely different and can be rewarding in a lot of different ways, and so I enjoy it. But I know it's a different career,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't think any member of your family actually faced death in the way that you have. So I'm sure there's, the very different experiences that you had compared to your family that led down to you going down this path. And as a pastor, you think about, about people's spirits and how to uplift them and all that. So I guess in my way, you do work with people or work within yourself. How do I live to be a better person? How do I make society much better? But there must be a point where you kind of crashed into, okay, so now with technology. So how did your life kind of crash into AI and other technologies? Because from your past, you were in the Army, you became a pastor. There's no, well, I guess in the Army there's a lot of technology, but just in your personal career, there hasn't been any point where you touched on technology. Why is that?
Yeah, so I actually programmed robots in high school. I volunteered through different programs they had, trying to kind of create career opportunities for kids through the Nissan plant. And one of the initiatives was you could come in and they would train you how to program the robotics in the factory. And so that was my first experience with automation, and I just kind of fell in love with it. And I really was fascinated by this large tech, and I'd been doing, computer programming and on a small scale, networking, those type of things. And really, I just connect with that type of stuff. Sometimes you just understand stuff, and for me, that's what it was. And so I've always been fascinated by computers. Just love tech in a lot of ways. And so that was kind of my first initial experience with it in high school. And then in the military, so our job was air defense artillery. And so jets and planes and stuff like that, especially after September 11th, you can see why that would be a huge emphasis. And so, but overseas, especially in Iraq, there's no, there are, but there's not really a big presence of, aircraft and stuff like that. And so what we did, we worked with a system that was anti-rocket and mortar, and it was a big robot. It looked like R2-D2, but it had a 20 millimeter gun at the bottom of it. And so that was another point of contact for me, and just thinking about automation in warfare, and didn't really think about the ethics of it until later. Although there were some things that concerned me, but the robot saved my life and saved many other people's lives. And actually have a piece of the rocket right here that, should have been where I was, but if it wouldn't have been for that robot, who knows. But anyway, so I got out of the military and didn't really think much about that type of stuff for a while. And then I interacted with a couple of films that came out. So the BBC Channel 4 show Humans and Westworld really got me interested to think about what's the extent and possibility of the future of robots, and why would we create robots like this, and what would they be used for, and that type of thing. And so I did a independent study with a professor at my school, and spent about 6-7 months just kind of researching that topic on AI, and originally wanted to write about warfare and kind of the ethics of that, and I did, but I also wrote about work and sexuality and companionship and those things too, because they're very much tied to what is driving the industry. And so I took those three fields and I just kind of dove into them, and just asking from my theological perspective, what would be the concerns with adapting this technology or this technology. And so it is a very kind of narrow understanding of some of this tech, but most of our focus theologically is how can humans accomplish their purpose and flourish, and but also not harm others in the pursuit of making better technology, or in the pursuit of immortality, in the pursuit of financial gain, and all those things. We want to make sure that we're not oppressing other people, we're not hurting other people, because just as well as I, that one human's flourishing can mean another human's demise, right? And so we want to make sure that we're all in this ecosystem together, trying to flourish and caring for one another the best we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand. And with these robots or AI, you said the three topics, generally what you research on: war, work, and sex, which I think is the main ones that usually everybody thinks about when they think about AI. Now, you were in the Army, so you understand the whole war side of things. Right now, to my very limited knowledge, I think war in the future is not going to be men with guns walking through towns shooting and tanks rolling around. It's going to be drones and crafted air missile strikes and robots walking through, and a lot of it's actually going more cyber as well. There's a lot of cyber warfare that's going on without our knowledge. And I think that's kind of where most of the action is going to happen. And some say that it's actually better that we are not physically there, because we don't get hurt. We don't actually have to see with our own eyes people really getting killed, which I think is very important. But at the same time, when you're blowing up things and from a very far distance with like a remote controller, I mean, does that really help us really believe that war is not a human thing anymore? It's like a more machine thing. Sometimes I feel like, because it's almost like a video game, you actually dehumanize the part of war, that it takes the emotion out of it. And so I kind of think it's like a double-sided sword in some way.
Yeah, I actually talk about that in the book, the dehumanizing part of it. And so that's actually a very important component to accomplishing killing. So I went through this process when I was in the Army, that you kind of have to make peace with pointing a weapon at somebody and, potentially pulling a trigger, or that you might have to harm someone, even maybe a small child. And so that is a very strange process to go through. And some of the things that we, even in training, that they kind of expose you to are meant to desensitize you to what you might see in warfare. And to be fair, it is a very dehumanizing experience. It is very harmful and messy. And so I don't think that goes away with machines. And I think there are scholars like Ronald Arkin who would argue that it does. Like you're saying, it will make war cleaner and more humane and all those things. But I also think that it could lead to more conflicts, because it now takes away some of the cost of warfare. And even now with how we use drones and other pieces of tech, we use algorithms. And there's one called Bugsplat, there's one called Skynet. But basically, as long as the collateral damage is below 30%, then we have our justification to make that strike. And so that's very dangerous, because, that algorithm is set to find a certain pattern. It's in many ways flawed. It's not accounting for real people. It's just a probability and an estimation, right? It's not real time. Who's in that building? There might be 15 kids in there. There might be a bunch of senior adults. Who knows, right? It's not real data. It's imaginary in many ways. But that is what we are using to justify strikes. And all over Yemen, Pakistan, Afghanistan, different places that we've used these drones, thousands of women and children have been killed in this collateral damage process. And so I'm not too optimistic that more technology is going to make us more ethical in our killing. And in many ways, I think that is kind of a myth that we want the public to believe about what this machinery will do in warfare. Warfare is always going to be war, and that's what it is. It's messy, gory, unpredictable, and behind it, right, is emotional humans. And so for someone to tell me that, it's going to make it better, it's going to, but you still have the human behind the machine, and you're assuming that these two actors are going to be like, our machine's lost today, and we're just going to pack up and go home. That's just not how it works. And, in the history of human conflict, people that's just not a reality, I think. In fact, a lot of the Second World War was kind of driven by, a bad taste after the First World War. So, that's just, we're getting bloodier, not less, bloody as time goes on. And as we introduce more machines, the 20th century was definitely vastly bloodier than the 19th century as far as warfare. So I'm not quite buying that argument, but I understand it.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of more efficiency rather than humanizing or dehumanizing war, because in reality, you are actually killing people, and you're actually putting statistics onto it, saying 30%. Okay, well, 30% is minimal, so it's okay, and that includes women and children as well, right? So, I think that technology doesn't make us more ethical. We actually have to be ethical in order to use technology, and technology is not going to help us to be anything but. So we have to work on ourselves to be a much better person, and then get a hold of these technologies. But I think as we go on in society with, not really, or I would say complacent about our ethical values of life, of human sentient beings, that we start to just use these technologies for whatever we want to. And I think that with the war thing, it's just, I think most of us just think of Terminators, right? I think, there's no emotion attached to it. If it's a person walking down the street with a gun and sees a woman and child, they'll think, oh, I shouldn't kill. There's a holdback of that. Whereas a machine will think, okay, 30% is minimal, so it doesn't matter. I'm not at that 30% yet. I'm just gonna shoot, right? So I don't know how you code those things in properly, but I think that but there's going to be somebody who's coding that thing in, saying 30% is minimal, so it allows the machine to actually go and kill that. And once these things become more conscious, and this is something like really down the road, right? Maybe it's 50 years, 100 years, who knows? But if these AIs become conscious, are they going to make the kind of ethical choice in order to hold back on certain commands? Or will we be able to design them with ethics? And this is something I think about quite a lot, because we haven't evolved that much as human beings in order to work with these technologies. We're still quite barbarous, right? We have to admit, we are quite barbarous, and we haven't really matured that much in a sense where technology has exponentially grown so much, and we can't keep up with that. So when we think about warfare in general, I mean, we have to think about do we really have to be doing this in the first place? I mean, isn't that the place where we need to come back to and think about?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question, is, should we? And that's where I kind of start in some of my research is, there's two questions that we could ask as a society. One is, can we do it? And we see that in kind of the drive behind the Manhattan Project with the first atomic bomb. And, that was a can we do this? The question they should have asked is, should we do it? And how many people are going to die when those bombs are released? And, a lot. And the U.S. is the only ones to, drop nuclear weapons, to my knowledge. And so, but we're probably the first ones to develop it in that sense. And so if we would not have developed it, it would have been a much better outcome, I think, for a lot of people, men, women, and children. But, and so I think a lot of people are concerned that this technology, like you said, T-800s and that type of thing, we think about Terminators. I don't think it'll quite be like that. I'm much more concerned about the smaller, nuanced drones that may surveil you or spy on you and use that to manipulate government infrastructure, or to assassinate and to set up political regimes and those type of things, or even voting and that type of thing, to really push the chips in one person's favor. I think it'll be a little bit more subtle than Terminator, just because a T8, even the response from the Boston Dynamics police dog, right? That was a huge. People were terrified when they just released this dog into the public. And it was like, that was terrible. That's not how you unveil a new piece of technology like that, a police robotic dog. And so just imagine what would have happened if a T-800 would have walked out of that precinct. There would have been riots. And so I don't know. I think people are going to learn, companies will learn from that and try to make it more palatable to the public, but that's also an issue in itself. And so with all this technology and talking about ethics, we don't know how some systems are going to act, right? We're putting inputs in there and it gives us an output, but we might not know in the nodes how it made that decision. So how it in its thinking. And even with humans, right, we don't fully understand the brain, and we don't fully understand all the complexity of how our consciousness works. And so I'm not optimistic that we're going to figure it out for robots either, which will be a little bit more complicated than we are. And so I'm not really worried about super intelligence, artificial general intelligence. I think robots, a good way to think about it is how Kate Darling thinks about it at MIT is, they can be like animals. We look at them that way. They're a totally different entity than we are. They're going to have a totally different development and evolution, and their minds work very different. And so I think that's a very helpful analogy, because what we tend to do is want to kind of look in the mirror of a robot and see ourselves and think, well, how does it develop like a child? How does it develop like a human? And it's really not anything like us. We may make it look like us, and it may have, humanoid features, but that doesn't make it human. And I don't think it ever will be human. And that's okay, right? It's something about it just, it's very, very spiritual in a lot of ways, because we're projecting all this hope and desire onto this piece of technology, and hoping for this fulfillment from this. It's not a deity or anything, but in some ways I think it kind of is. We're looking to it for healing, for restoration of our economy and different things, and it may give it to us. It may actually fix a lot of things. I don't know, but I don't think it's a savior. I don't think it's a destroyer either. I think it's somewhere in the middle, and depending on how we use it and develop it, it could be a really good thing for society. If we focus on the right regulation and policies, if we use it for good means, and I think about the Japanese government and in South Korea, how the push to innovate this technology is driven by concerns about the elderly, concerns about companionship, and those type of things. And I think those are noble drives. But there's also other influences behind the scenes too, that you kind of follow the money when it comes to AI. And a lot of people don't know this, but AI, especially in the West, it's driven by a military Department of Defense foundation. Like that's where it really begins, is the military wanted to develop this technology to surveil, to acquire targets, to have more precision in those things. Now out of that we have lots of benefits, right? And that's just kind of been the nature of military research, is there's a lot of money, and that's where we get our grants and research from, and that's where people need jobs, and so they go there and they develop tech, and the military uses it, and then everybody else uses it. So I have a lot of thoughts on that, but that's just kind of what it is in its being and creation. It's going to be used in different ways, and some of it we have control over and some of it we don't. But I do think trying to, the best we can, to be ethical with our design and our use of this technology is the most important thing that we should be talking about right now. Is how will we regulate, how will we protect, how will we deal with liability issues, how will we deal with negligence issues. Everything in the US law system kind of, it favors this technology. It favors automated workers and all this stuff, and so there's lots of tax incentives for companies to develop it. And especially in light of COVID, or people are not only concerned about their ledgers, but they're also concerned about their health. So there's now even more of a push to kind of develop this technology and release it onto society.
Yeah, for sure. And also, profit-driven corporations definitely want this thing because they can automate a lot of the jobs and reduce their expenses. Human payroll, all that stuff is much more heavy than a lot of the other costs that they usually have. And this is a great way for them to reduce down the cost. Now, I don't believe in future of profit-driven corporations being ethical and saying that we want to keep people alongside with AI. I think they're just going to drive people away, and really embrace this AI technology. And probably it is maybe good for certain jobs. I mean, people who are there, inputting data in Excel, it's a very menial job, and maybe there's no joy in doing these things. But a lot of people tell me this as well, is that there are people who are not that excited about doing work to begin with. Maybe they don't really want to, like a lot of these entrepreneurs say, like, follow your passion or find your passion and make that into your job. Maybe they actually want to go home and play guitar and spend time with their family. Maybe that's their passion, and their work is a means to a living. So what are you going to do with all these people, right? Because they're not going to go out and become a professional guitarist, because there's probably not that much money in there to begin with. So it's great as a hobby, and they could spend time with their family. So what are you going to do with all these people who are not your typical entrepreneur? I'm going to follow my passion. Look at me, I'm Jeff Bezos kind of person, right? So as a pastor as well, I mean, you are going to see a lot of these people, kind of, as young children, as they become older and become adults, and you're going to see the societal change happening with AI bringing about automation in a lot of the jobs that we know right now. Yes, there's an argument you could say that there might be other jobs being created alongside that, but we don't really know that for sure. But you have to mentally prepare them for that kind of different society. How do you usher in this kind of new social construct to your people?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple different books out there that are kind of pushing that idea. And John Danaher has actually written on that. Automation and Utopia, I think is the title. Really well. I like John a lot, and he's a wonderful philosopher. But I tend to disagree with him in the conclusion parts, like what we should do, not about his research or anything like that. But and so he and others are saying that this is a reality, and I think they're right. Like it's definitely forthcoming. But the conclusion part, what should we do? I'm not sure that more leisure is to the betterment of society. For example, take COVID. I saw personally, as a pastor, a lot of mental illness come out of COVID. And my counseling was way up. Issues in marriage were way up. Conflict with children, addictions, different types of things that we wouldn't say are human flourishing. They wouldn't say that this is, the best society that we would imagine. And so if COVID is just a small piece of that, and a small foreshadowing, then what happens when, there is no reason to go to work, and maybe the job is automated so much that, we just need you to come in for a couple hours a week, and, it's not about money anymore, but it's about fulfillment and purpose. And so one of the things that is quite unique about being a pastor is that I kind of get to see, kind of like a therapist, behind the veil of people's minds and heart. And for whatever reason, people tell me things that they probably wouldn't tell other people. And so I have a lot of secrets, but I see a lot into people's emotions and their behavior. And it wasn't good what I saw in COVID in myself and in others. The reckless spending. Home Depot was extremely packed every day. It's like, what, who has money to go build new projects? And apparently everybody did. And even, just the day-to-day trying to deal with children and trying to deal with family, it's hard, right? And so that would be a massive societal shift, that I'm not sure just saying, well, we'll have more leisure time is the answer. I think you have to really prepare people even now, like even in their education, like to be able to deal with that type of isolation and that type of leisure, just that's really hard to deal with. And I don't think we've quite grasped, like you said, the impact of that, and what that will be like for society. It could mean, in a lot of ways, the end of us, because what do we do? And so, for example, people go through identity crises at different points in their life. You go through one when you're a teenager, you go through one when you go to college, when you graduate college, when you start your first major job, and then when you retire. And so I see a lot of people who retire from their job of 20, 30 years, and some handle it well, but a lot of them, a majority of them, really struggle with it. As what do I do with my time? I have all these resources and I don't know what to do with my time, and I'm just trying to get out of the house and different things. And so it could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing. And so that's what concerns me about the work aspect of this is, one, I don't think we're going to be fulfilled. Just look at Amazon and other major factories that are automating to the most they can, and what the environment they create is like for the human, right? It's not good. And as much as we all appreciate Amazon and the convenience of it, sometimes less is more, and sometimes, more is harmful. And so in this push to innovate and to be faster and bigger and better, I think sometimes we can kind of harm people in the process. And especially, every time you order something on Amazon Prime, there's, flashing red lights going off, and, people are hustling to get that shipped out and all this stuff. And robots are only going to expedite that, right? And so it's only going to be more complications, because robots are good at doing narrow things, right? And as fun as sci-fi is, as much as we enjoy it, we're just so far away from even like something like WALL-E. It's so far away, because robots can do one major task really well. They can do one set of computation really well, but then and they are developing. If you saw the Boston Dynamics, I think it was Atlas, the video they released about him doing the mashed potato and different things like that. So they're getting better, and that may be on the near horizon. I don't know, but either way, I think there's pause for concern, because what happens to the human? What is their new job? And so I try to help people think about it this way. With automation work and different things, it's not about being replaced by a robot. It's about being repurposed. And what will that repurposing do to you personally? And how will that make you feel? How will that change your sense of value and worth if you go into your job on Monday and they say, hey, this is your new coworker, and actually he's going to be telling you what to do. You're going to help him accomplish your job. So basically his handler, do whatever he needs you to do. And how would you feel about that as a human, and knowing that, you can do simple things that he can't do or it can't do, but it can do your job quicker and faster and produce more revenue for the company. And I think we have an issue with that. I know I would personally, so maybe that's just me.
No, I think that would be most people. And I think that when you talked about people who are retired and have not really nothing to do, because all their life they were thinking work hard, that's kind of, a little bit of sacrifice of your life for the betterment of your family. And then once that's done, your children are already out of the house. They have their own families. You're at 60 something, almost at 70, and you have absolutely nothing to do at home. I mean, it takes a lot of the dignity out of you, and you're being pretty much told by society, you're done, right? You're finished. There's no purpose in that working society anymore, and you have to go find yourself, which is really hard when you spent 30-40 years of your life dedicating to the work or the profession that you really were attached to. So as like young people are kind of going into this society, they might not even have the taste of actually working very hard for corporations and such. I mean, it might be a situation where they have to go find something that they think they could make money off of, and it's not about like sending in a resume to a corporation. I mean, I think that concept, and I speak about this on various episodes too, but corporation is going to be some machine that produces things, and people are not necessary in corporations anymore. You as a human being will have to find something for yourself to do, and also be able to bring some income into the family, right? And so mentally preparing people at a young age, let's say my kids, or probably your kids as well, because I presume they're young, they're kind of already kind of seeing this. You see like these kids on YouTube making so much money, and obviously that's a really small tiny piece of people, but there are ways that some people are finding out that they can make money in this world. But if you're heading into a place where the education system was telling you get good grades, acquire all these skills, get into a good university, and then you're off on your own. It doesn't work now for this new future, right? So I think I talk about ethics too, but like it's also about like the way of life, right? And I think that what you need to teach them is not about go to work and that's kind of like 90% of your life. It's you have to change the whole philosophy around the way of life, isn't it? I mean, that's what I kind of think when I look at my children.
Yeah, that's very important, Taki, that we understand and kind of drive whatever that worldview is for you and your family, but helping our children understand. And I think the bigger picture is, how can I be a good citizen in my society? How can I contribute to this, body? How can I contribute to this organism that I'm a part of? And seeing how much we are intertwined as humans, and even with animals and stuff, that how I treat them is a reflection of me. How I treat technology and use or abuse it is a reflection of my own morality. And so, we don't just kick the Roomba because we're mad at it. That's just not what we do. And we get frustrated at different times, but you can't just go punch your coworker. I mean, you can, but that's not the ethical thing to do. It's much better to go and talk and try to resolve the issue with understanding and mercy and grace, versus just fighting or whatever it is. And so there are different ways to resolve issues for sure, but what we try to teach our kids is consideration of other people, attributes of mercy and grace, and but we have to kind of demonstrate what that looks like to our kids first, and modeling that with how we treat our spouse, how we treat our coworkers. And so they are observing us. And so, like you said, that think about from the child's perspective, if they're observing you and your whole life is wrapped around my job and making money and trying to do whatever, kids really don't care about that. They don't care if you're poor or not. I mean, at some point they might, when they become teenagers and such, but then they're a totally different human altogether. But when they're little, what they crave and desire is mommy and daddy's, or whatever your family is like. They crave parental love and acceptance and affirmation. They crave your time. They don't care about your deadlines. They don't care about your job. They need that, and that is very much currency to them. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of this conversation in society, is that technology is great. We use it in a lot of different ways. We're using it right now, but it should never repurpose and replace us in a way that we lessen and devalue human connection, face-to-face interaction, physical touch, that type of companionship. Because I think if we're honest, we kind of we prefer the passiveness of tech, and that's why it's addictive, because we can control it. I mean, think about why somebody would prefer a robotic girlfriend. It's never going to say no. It's never going to have a headache or whatever it is. It's just there to serve you, and that is a problem for me, because what we teach, we'll have 2 daughters and a son, is that love is about seeing the well-being of the other person and seeking that well-being out. That's what love is. And a robot, it's not going to be able to do that. It's a sociopath in a lot of ways. And that, likewise, if that's how you treat it, doesn't that kind of make you a sociopath in a way? If your only object is, you're making an object of desire, you're using it for gratification or whatever. And I think that's also, it says something about us as humans. And so, and we have a lot of robots, in our house, and there are emotional connections to them. We have a little Cosmo, and when I first got it, my little boy, he would cry. It was like it died when the battery ran down. It's like it's okay. It'll charge back up, and it's an emotional connection. And so it can be used to train for good. It can be used to foster proper treatment of other entities, or I could train it for evil. I could teach it to do bad things and foster that as well. And so our children, especially, and this is what concerns me about society in general, our focus on technology and coding and only the sciences, is that we kind of leave out the importance of the humanities, and what that teaches us is ethics, philosophy, literature, and we also gain a lot of ethics and philosophy through literature, and how to communicate, because we're not robots, and you can hurt somebody's feelings in a text message, etc. And so you're even seeing, in light of different social media and stuff, young girls who are unable to communicate to a boy or a girl, who are having difficulty finding relationships, even though they are attractive and beautiful. They don't know how to talk to each other. They don't know how to it's just so funny to me, because growing up, if you wanted to ask someone out, you had to do it, right? You had to muster the courage to investigate them, and not stalk them, but you had to figure out what they liked, and actually talk to them and ask them questions, and I think we've lost that in a lot of ways, and so that's important, because you think about marriage and sustaining a relationship. The sex and all that stuff is great, and it's a gift, but it's not going to be the same in your 50s and 60s. And so if you want to maintain that relationship, guess what? You have to talk to each other, and you have to deal with each other. And so, I'm not to say that they don't have sex or anything, but it's definitely different. That's not something that we think about. I definitely don't think it's something people think about now, is what sustains long-term health and enjoyment in just the basic things of life, in marriage and in work and different things. And so, yeah, I mean, teach them while they're young, but also we want to teach our oldest coding and different things like that, but it's also very important to us that she has a firm grasp on philosophy and the humanities, which she will. She's just kind of geared that way, and so whatever she does with her life, I'm not pushing one way or the other. I want her to be able to read for herself, to question things, to be skeptical at certain points, and to be able to investigate for herself, what she believes and what she values, and then to act according to that. And so that's just kind of my perspective.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we touched upon the sex part of things and the robots. I'm just taking an example of like a society like Japan. Maybe you don't know too much about it, but I left Japan 12 years ago, so I don't pretend to know everything what's going on. But the Japanese society is going through a demographic change where there's a lot of boomers who are retired and unproductive, and then you have this smaller population of youngsters coming in, but at the same time they don't want to have sex, they don't want to have relationships, they don't have jobs either. I mean, now because of these automation, the corporates don't need that many people, so young people don't actually get full-time jobs anymore, and there are people actually doing like part-time jobs here and there, and their future looks pretty bleak. So I think that kills off their reproductive drive as well. Maybe I don't want to have a girlfriend or boyfriend because I have to deal with their economics when I'm pretty unstable myself, and then people have less sex, less relationship, and then even with the smartphones, maybe they just dive into the virtual world. They could pretend that they could be somebody else and have this fake relationships all throughout the social media. And when these sex robots come into their life, that might be a gift sent from God, because they don't have to deal with people. Maybe they have a very unstable life, but at least this robot's not going to complain to me. She's not going to ask me to buy her dinner or, support her in any way, right? So that's what I worry about, is that, I think all of our society is kind of potentially mirroring what Japan is doing, like maybe 10, 20 years later, because if all this automation is happening all across the board and we don't have jobs and we have very unstable lives, and we don't want to have spouses or partners saying, what are you doing right now? How are you going to support this family, this and that? I'd just rather have sex with a robot. That's kind of what I would think, is like, I'll just have a relationship with a robot, which is very stress-free. I could put all the sexual desires onto this robot, not going to complain. It's much easier, you don't have to have a real relationship. So, if for many people, or kind of having that idea, it's going to be even worse off than it is now, in some way. And that's kind of what I worry about. I mean, I don't have an answer for, how we can make society much better with sex robots amongst us. But, I just think that it's going to be very difficult to cut that tie with easy relationships with a robot.
Yeah. And so I think you're right, Taki. It's something that concerns, even concerning the Japanese government, right? They, and not just with sex robots, but with current AI chatbots or artificial girlfriends. I'm not quite sure what the current lingo is, but there's been concern about, we have a growing elderly population, which I think, like you said, is going to be mirrored in other places as well in the West, that we're living longer and reproducing less, and so it's an issue. And so what do we do? I think some of this comes from a very good place. I think one of the arguments for sex robots is that it could treat these type of scenarios where there's people who are maybe pedophiles or something like that, and so it gives them an outlet for their desire. But even then, would we say that all desires should be fulfilled? And so I don't think we're quite honest with ourselves sometimes, that we want this sexual liberation for all people, but I don't think we really believe that, because there's lots of people who we wouldn't want to sexually liberate, but because that's how our culture has been pushed, and I don't really care about people's sexual life. It's none of my business if that's what you want to do. But I don't think sex robots is the answer and solution to the problems that we're facing. And I think there's a great work by a philosopher who's passed away in the recent years, Roger Scruton, who wrote a book called Sexual Desire, and it's a philosophical investigation into why we desire certain things and what has been pushed, I guess really since Freud and Foucault and others, philosophers that were really big on sexual liberation, is that, dealing with desire is its own virtue. Like, just because you have a desire doesn't mean it needs to be met, right? And so if my desire is I want to go play video games 24/7, well, I don't live in a vacuum. I have a family, but even if I was single, still have, for most people, right? You still have family, you still have an obligation to society, you still have obligations of being a citizen in that society. So whatever that is, whatever that means. So we don't just recluse and say, you know what, this world's all about me and my gratification. But in essence, that's what the sex robot is. It's saying it's all about you, your gratification. And I think people will be attracted to that. I think people will desire that. And even people who are not sexually deviant will desire that, because like during COVID, 8 million people downloaded an AI chatbot. It was called Replica, and spelled with a K. And 8 million people downloaded this chatbot, and which before COVID, it was not even close to that. And so that tells us something about what COVID did to people psychologically. And not just single people, but there are even married people who downloaded it because they'd rather deal with their desires through the chatbot than their actual wife. And so it's not just the single people who wanted to kind of skirt all that together, but even married people. And so there are interviews with guys who are married, have kids, and they have this relationship to this chatbot. And I think that's very disturbing, because we have a purpose in society. And even if it's not, even if you're not religious or, believe it's a theological purpose, just in reproducing and continuing our species, right? We have an obligation in some ways to maintain ourselves and to at least make it a desirable outcome for our children. And so I don't think sex robots is a step towards that. I think it might actually be a step away from it, because it's going to ensure, granted, I'll give them this, that it might actually prevent some rape. It might actually prevent, the abuse of some children. And so I don't know. It's just too early to tell what the research will find. But my suspicion is that the way that desire works, and so if that was the case, then why doesn't pornography work in that way? Why doesn't showing a pedophile childlike pornography, why doesn't that take away the urge and desire? And what it actually does, as we know why it's addictive, is that it makes you want more, right? Because it touches something in your brain, the place that releases dopamine and pleasure centers, right? It's made for that reason. And there's lots of debates about whether or not pornography is beneficial to society. And that's just a whole different topic, but you can't argue that it's made to be addictive, and it's made to do one thing, and that's the person gratifying themselves. And so is that helpful to society? Will that be replicated in robots? For sure. Yeah, that's what they're going to use it for. Corporations are going to use it to make money. There's already a huge demand for it. And so I think it's something we should be concerned about.
I think out of the work, war, and sex in terms of robots, I think sex robots are probably the worst for humanity. I really think so, because it's all, as you say, it's all about desire. How do you project all your desires into this sex bot? It doesn't matter if it's men or women, right? I think everybody wants to have a desirable sexual engagement without hassle, with no strings attached. And I think that's kind of normal. I think it's normal to kind of think like that. There's nothing wrong to think that like that either. But, but severing your ties with actual human relationships and rather having that with a sex bot is probably the end of humanity, is kind of what I think it is. And I don't want to finish this with a really bad note. So if there's, I really think that this is something that we really have to think about before ending this episode. But, I think because we identified the risks of what these robots can do to us, right? Whether it's war, work, or sex, then we can start to use our imagination to see, okay, if that's going to be the world that we're going to live, 20, 30 years down the line, how do we prepare for ourselves? And I think this is the conversation that we should have amongst ourselves, and to be ethically prepared for that future to come. And I really value having conversations with you, Joshua, about these topics, because it's some people just don't really want to dive into it, but you really dove into it head first, even wrote a book about it. Could you tell our audience what the title of the book and where we can find this book?
Yeah, it's called Robotic Persons, Our Future with Social Robots. You can find it everywhere, literally in every country, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, wherever books are sold, basically you can find it. And I do believe, Taki, our future, it can be good. We can flourish. And the most important thing that I would want your listeners to know is that, if we advocate for the right policies, if we take the right steps, then our future can be very bright. It can be very safe, and we can work with robots to flourish. But if we don't, then we've already discussed what the risks are.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for our conversation. I really enjoyed it. Deeply engaging. Thank you so much for your time, and hope to connect you again soon.
All right, man. Take care. Thank you for having me on.
Hi, this is your host Takatoshi Shibayama. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. Now, if you enjoyed or disliked this show, please let me know by writing in the comment section. The only way I can improve or add value to you is through your voices. If there are any topics that you would like me to pick up, please also let me know in the comments. I'd love to start chatting with you all. And if you would like to continue watching the show, please subscribe. Thank you.